Leading up to the 1900s in Europe, the widely popular artistic movement Impressionism was coming to an end. The lasting effect it would have on the future of art in the 20th century would be immense. From the end of Impressionism, a new art movement was born, known as Expressionism. Originating in Germany, this art type prioritized emotion and subjective experiences, rather than objective real facts. The common themes of exaggeration, fantasy, and spontaneous self-expression led to conflicts with artists and authoritarian groups, such as the Nazi Party in the 1940s. Before Expressionism had officially begun, artists had already begun to challenge norms of art at the time, such as historicism. One such group came from Vienna, out of the Vienna Academy of Arts. These artists with their avant-garde styles split off from the Academy and pursued their new ideas. Artists such as Gustav Klimt and Joseph Hoffmann would lead the secession, to spread their intellect and unity against their Academy's traditions of repetitively using the same classical styles. With paintings such as Adele Bloch-Bauer and Oskar Kokoschka's Windsbraut, hints of intense, passionate colors struck subjective thoughts and emotions into the viewer. Their goal was to unite art of all types, or Gesamtkunstwerk, and would later go on to include architecture. Hitler would come to view these paintings as degenerate, and would persecute these artists while confiscating their works. Nevertheless, their breaking off from tradition turned into a sign of their works leading to early Expressionism. The creation of the art group De Brocke, which translates to the bridge in English, would signify that the Expressionist movement had begun. The group worked to bridge the gap between the past and the present, using techniques from history such as lino block prints on wood. This technique boasts an even clearer connection to the Vienna secession, as our historian Mr. Milam will tell you.
Die Brocke's manifesto stated, "Everybody is part of us, who represents unaltered and directly that which moves him to create." The artists of Die Brocke also wanted to derive art from true expression and emotion, which led them to focus on privatism, or the portrayal of wild humans without civilization. This group was composed of 4 German architects, Erich Hecknow, Ernst Ludwig Kirchner, Fritz Braille, and Karl Schmidt-Rottluff. Emerging mainly from Kirchner's fame was a distinct style that would describe early German expressionist art.
The harsh natures of their paintings, such as Berlin's street scene, depicted the instabilities of the German culture, especially after World War I. Nudes would also be a prominent feature, as they would contrast with the Renaissance style by placing the figure in its true form deliberately, with nature to express the interconnectivity between the two. The group disbanded in 1913 after a disagreement over a chronicle written about the artist by Kirchner himself, where he would portray himself as the dominant member of the group, obviously riddled with fame. The end of De Brocke ushered in the second wave of Expressionism, known as Der Blaureiter. As Russian immigrants based in Munich, this team of artists was much bigger than De Brocke and more inclusive with women artists such as Gabriele Munter and Marianne van Werfken. But it had many similarities. Both groups focused on self-interpretation and nature, but Der Blaureiter was much more concerned with the spiritual aspects of life. Their name, in fact, came from the artist's love for the color of blue, and how they thought of it as the color of spirituality. While De Brocke generally saw the start of World War I and predicted it would be a setback for the German nation, Der Blaureiter, especially Franz Marc, believed the war would purify Europe. The paintings from Der Blaureiter were much calmer and peaceful to the eye than the striking contours of De Brocke. With the more spiritual expressions in their mind, artists such as Wassily Kandinsky and August Macke would attempt to transcend instead of look down upon the time of the war. Though they kept these beliefs, most of the artists in Der Blaureiter had to return to Russia once the war had begun, and only in the war did they truly realize its horrors before being killed in battle.
World War I impacted the art world greatly, from the intense political scene to the horrors of man shown during the war. The human beast was a term coined to describe the terrible image of man, shown by the death and destruction around the world during this time. One artist named Max Beckmann, who fought in World War I, demonstrated the impact of the war on artists. His painting entitled The Grenade depicts the destruction from a handheld grenade in a chaotic art style. The facial expressions of the soldiers are traumatized as the grenade explodes nearby. Art historian Mr. McCurdy will explain more about World War I's impact on Beckmann's art.
Max Beckmann's change of art style from before the war to after it demonstrates the mental and emotional strain he felt from war. His art style was more happy and peaceful, with characters having round faces and healthy bodies. This style is a stark contrast to his work after the war, as characters had sharper features and the paintings used less color.
As World War I was a global affair, all artists were affected by the event, and German Expressionism was no exception. Expressionism continued to grow after World War I. As Germany became more authoritarian, artists experienced a great deal of suppression on controversial art. It became dangerous to produce art that did not portray Germany positively, which affected artists such as George Grosz. During a new movement in Expressionism called the Neue Sachlichkeit, which meant new objectivity, George Grosz had to flee Germany after he painted a piece on wealth. The painting showed gluttony and greed in the rich, which did not bode well with the Gestapo. Oskar Schlemmer was another example of this suppression. A professor at the Bauhaus School of Architecture, Schlemmer taught murals and was the head of the theater department. He was denounced as Jewish by the Third Reich, and he left school after one of his murals was defaced. The treatment of artists did not improve when Hitler came to power. The most notable event during this period for Expressionism was the Degenerate Art exhibition. This event was created to criticize and vandalize art that did not stand for Germany. The exhibition lasted for 3 years as it traveled around Germany, and the art was often sold or destroyed by the Nazi Party. This event marked the end of Expressionism, as this was the last time people were able to experience the art. Expressionism had been denounced as degenerate in 1923, but the Degenerate Art exhibition finally ended the movement in 1937. The process of art censorship did not only occur in Germany. This process has happened in many countries all throughout history as a form of suppressing certain groups or ideas. Years after the Nazi movement during the Cold War, the USSR was censoring the film industry to convince its citizens of the effectiveness of communism. Artistic film was almost non-existent as the government needed all film and art to portray the USSR correctly. These examples display that even under oppressive governments, artists will flourish and express emotion with innovative styles.